Now, we all know how important civil society organizations and, by extension, development partners are to the success of elections. Apart from liaising with the relevant government agencies and the political parties, they also directly or indirectly engage with the citizens, encouraging them to take up their civic responsibility of participating in the voting process. It's a crucial role that starts well ahead of the election, with voter registration and education campaigns for the electorate, as well as engaging the political parties on the need for issue-based campaigns and inclusiveness in their plans, whilst discouraging malpractices. They also work with the Electoral Commission, INEC, and the security agencies charged with responsibility for the election, helping them to carry out reforms and to work towards a peaceful and credible ballot. So when you hear about things like the new electoral law, reviews of electoral policy, and the adoption of technologies to enhance the fairness of elections, spare a thought for the behind-the-scenes support that's being given by the development partners. Well, to shed more light on how these development partners operate in Nigeria and Africa, I'm joined now in the studio by the Regional Director of the Ford Foundation, Dr. Chichi Okoye, by the Director of the MacArthur Foundation in Nigeria, Kole Shettima, and by the manager of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, or OSIWA, Hawa, who operates from Senegal. Thank you very much indeed to all of you for coming in. And let me begin with a word of introduction from you, Dr. Chichi Okoye, about your organization and what they were set up to do. The Ford Foundation, of course, you are the West African Regional Director, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for having me. The Ford Foundation is a social justice organization, so we're interested in ensuring a world in which there is the absence of inequality in general. In particular, we're interested in making sure that the countries where we work in and the citizens of those countries benefit from the resources of those countries and are treated with dignity and respect, and are able to function as active citizens in their countries.
Well, that sounds like a very broad remit.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's in general what it is we do. In West Africa, our focus is in two broad areas. We work in the natural resource and climate change, because of course West Africa is a resource-rich region, but of poor people. So a lot of the benefits do not accrue to the citizens or to the countries, and so we work with communities to try and ensure that the natural resources that come out of the region are effectively applied and that the people benefit from it. We also work in the gender and racial and ethnic justice, and focusing really on gender-based violence, because we recognize that women, of course, are extremely important when it comes to development, and sexual violence against women is one of the most debilitating things that happen to them. So those are the two critical areas of support that we provide in West Africa. But we do more than that, including support to the elections, but I will get to that after.
Yes, and obviously the elections are top of the agenda right now, yeah, for many people in this country. And Kole Shettima, many of our viewers may well know the name, the MacArthur Foundation, but they may not necessarily know that it has operated offices in Nigeria since 1994 and has so far invested nearly $400 million in grants since that time. Just tell us more.
Yeah, the MacArthur Foundation was established in 1978 with the headquarters in Chicago. Here in Nigeria, the office was opened in 1994, and since that 1994, we have worked in various areas, including population and reproductive health, higher education, girls' secondary education, human rights on the Niger Delta, And recently, our focus has been around accountability and anti-corruption. And in doing this work around accountability and anti-corruption, we are doing 4 major things. One is support for independent media. We know that media is critical and very important in bringing about accountability and holding those people in power to account and to hold them to be responsible. And we believe that an independent media is necessary and essential for the democracy and for democratic practices in Nigeria. And so we support like 40 or 45 media organizations in Nigeria. The second area of the work we are doing is around behavioral change. We know that a number of the things around accountability and corruption is also around our behavior, our norms, and our values and other things. So the challenge is how do we ensure that we are not only just focusing on one aspect of our world, but how do we ensure that, for example, our religious leaders who are Nigerians believe that they are religious people, but what does our religion say about accountability and anti-corruption? Do we begin with a Muslim prayer and close with a Christian prayer, and in between we do all the bad things? Is that what our faith says? So we ask and challenge our people what our faith says about accountability and anti-corruption. We also focus in the behavioral change. We also focus about entertainment industry. We know that a number of role models are thrown in the media and in the entertainment industry. How are we showcasing good role models? Why are we always seem to be suggesting that all Nigerians are bad? How many other good role models can we actually project in Nigeria so that the young people do not just assume that the only good people in this country or the people who are successful in this country are the people who, for example, you cannot even want to name your child after them because of the kind of atrocity that they committed. So then the third area of the work in terms of accountability is around the criminal justice system. We all know that the rich people in this country can hire 30 lawyers, 40 lawyers, go and intimidate a magistrate judge who have just come out of university, and they can just get away with it. So we have been trying to support the implementation of the administration of a criminal justice system in Nigeria, which is supposed to accelerate the process of ensuring that people who are accused of doing something wrong, actually the process is accelerated so that we don't have these too many cold cases of people who go and do whatever. And the last aspect of the work we do is around what we call a joint body, which is essentially means how do we bring together civil society groups and organizations can do an advocacy work for good governance and accountability in Nigeria.
Well, thank you for that. That sounds like a very tall order. And it would be interesting to see to what extent you have actually gone to achieving some of the things you set out to achieve. But let me go over to our overflow studio, as we put it. Thank you very much indeed, Hawa, for your patience. You are from the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, or ASIWA, and arguably your organization is the much younger kid on the block, isn't it? I mean, because it was established, from what I understand, in the year 2000 as part of the Global Soros Foundations, and it was founded by the business magnate and the billionaire George Soros. Tell us more about that.
That's true. ASIWA was founded in 2000 and was first headquartered in Abuja before moving to Dakar since 2002. And we are just actually transitioning to an Open Society Africa, where our 4 foundations on the continent are integrating into one, and we are just coming with a new strategy that is built around 3 key areas. One is around people-centered democracy. The second one is about around accountable governance, and the third one on inclusive development. And then we have 4 big pillars. One is on gender justice, women's rights, around sex and gender-based violence, around security of women, but also around economic opportunities for women. And then another pillar on accountability and justice, accountability of justice institutions on our continent, but also access to justice for the marginalized. A third pillar is about opportunity and equity, where our work center around economic reforms, economic policies coming out of COVID, and seeing how our economies have been affected by COVID. And then we look also under opportunity exhibit about resources, how resources benefit to the majority of the population on the continent. Participant and expression, what that I had, that division, and that looked at all around electoral processes, which is actually, it will be the heart of our conversation tonight. How electoral processes are free, fair, and deliver on good governance, because it's not only about the process, but it's about what the process leads to. We look at also at media, independent media, misinformation and disinformation, access to credible information, and how information reinforces democracy and inclusion. And then the last pillar is about security and rights. Obviously, our continent and our region is facing many challenges around security, but these challenges should not also lead to deprivation or disenfranchising citizens on their rights. So how can we balance fighting insecurity and ensuring people's rights, and how also should we work to make sure that depriving people of their right doesn't lead to insecurity? Thank you.
Well, thank you for setting that out, and I should point out that you are normally based in Senegal, and you sort of radiate out towards the rest of the region and the continent from there. And let me come to you, Dr. Chichi Okoye. I mean, you've seen several elections in this country in the last few years. Is this a particularly good time to be supporting elections in this country from the point of view of the Ford Foundation?
Yeah, the Ford Foundation has always supported elections in West Africa, including Nigeria, because even though it is not a core area of work for us, we recognize that if the democratic process is truncated, that will have implications for the work that we do and the ability for the civil society organizations that we support to do their work. So ensuring that there is an enabling environment, ensuring that the democratic process continues, to function, and ensuring that people's rights, in a democratic process is respected, are all important elements of the work that we do. So that's why, when elections come, we try to provide some support towards that. And this is one election, I think, that is quite important to Nigeria. Nigeria has done quite well. We have over 20 years now of continuous democratic process, which is something to celebrate. We have been able to transition from a ruling party to an opposition party. And so the democratic process is, in a way, even though it is still nascent, it is really growing in the right direction. So this is another pivotal time, of course, happening at a time when there's a lot of challenges, and not just challenges that the country itself is facing, but the world is facing. We're coming out of COVID. There's a war in Ukraine and Russia that is affecting energy prices, that's really exacerbating a lot of the challenges that COVID already started. Nigeria itself is also facing peculiar challenges in terms of the insecurity that we have, economic challenges, and a myriad of other problems. So these elections are crucial, for the development of the country, but also for the stability and the continuation of the problem. And that's why we think that it is important, to support it for three main reasons. First of all, to ensure, of course, that the country continues, but that it's important that the elections are free and fair, just because of the tensions that are in the country at this point in time. And three, that the elections are seen to be free and fair, because the elections could be free and fair, but they are not seen as free and fair, and that could have implications. So it is really to ensure the continuity and the stability of the country that we are interested in this election, and in providing support both to civil society and to the electoral body.
Well, I'm sure the Nigerians appreciate the inputs that the Ford Foundation is making and hoping to make as these elections draw near. And Kole Shettima, what role do you see your organization, the MacArthur Foundation, playing in Nigeria in trying to bring about the kinds of conversations on the subject of Nigerian elections in 2023 that will make a difference?
Well, certainly I think that, as Chichi said, this election is very important, as like the other previous elections as well. But I think going into this election, I think there are a number of important things that I think we need to do as a people and as a country, and how can private foundations like ours can contribute in that direction. For example, I think the issue of that we are all likely to face about, how can we support INEC and civil society organizations and citizens to ensure that, people register and people are able to collect their own PBCs on time. How can people go and locate their polling stations? Because if you remember, I think INEC made one of the most important developments in this country by creating about 30,000 more polling units, which was the first time over many years. So we need to make sure that people know where those polling units are, and that INEC is also able to populate those polling units so that we don't have polling units where you have 5 people, then the other one you have 500 people. We also want to think and talk about how do we deal with the insecurity in the country, and how does this insecurity may affect the election itself, and how, what are the legal and political implications of insecurity in the country, in the ability of INEC to declare an election, either at the state level, at the local government, or even at the national level. What are the areas that we may be able to work with citizens and civil society. But I think that the point also around misinformation, disinformation, perceptions, and other things are all very important areas of work that we hope as a MacArthur Foundation will be able to contribute towards reducing the menace of misinformation and disinformation, so that we don't create and add to the already existing tension in the country, and that people not only see the election as credible, but also perceive it as credible, but also INEC is able to conduct a fair, credible election that majority of Nigerians in the world will accept as credible.
That's as I said before. I mean, I suppose that's the stated objective. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's a lot of work that has to take place for that to become real, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that what we are trying to do is, what kind of resources are we able to support both INEC and civil society groups and organizations, either in terms of some of the technological challenges that needs to be put in place, the ability of INEC to respond to some of the citizens, but also for citizens also to see, because election is really, the election is not an INEC business only. Election is the business of political parties, of that of security agencies, even road transport workers, because in this country, road transport workers can actually create more problem for you on election day than what INEC itself can do. So I think that we have to see this election as a collective responsibility of all Nigerians, of different segments. And therefore, how can we bring all our own competencies, our energies, and our resources and our networks to ensure that, we are able to deliver on an election that hopefully will be one of the most significant, I think, elections, because we are going to have a transition in which the incumbent president is not going to run for an election. Hopefully, it's going to be also the last generation of the generals who ran to an election in Nigeria. We had President Obasanjo before. Now we have President General Mohamed Buhari, who are run also president. Hopefully, that this is going to go and bring about a generational shift in terms of the kind of people who will emerge as our president in 2023. Right,
that's very interesting. I'll come to you in a moment, Hawa Bar, in our off-site studio. But let me turn to you once again, Dr. Chichi Okoye of the Ford Foundation. In a sense, listening to both you and Mr. Shettima of the MacArthur Foundation, bearing in mind that you can't reach everyone or every organization in Nigeria, nevertheless you try to bring in people and groups that can keep reminding Nigerians that good governance is the primary issue that this country faces.
Yes, we work with civil society organizations primarily. But the Ford Foundation is one of the few foundations that is also able to work with government and indeed the private sector as well. And we do that because, first of all, we believe that it is the people who are in the communities, who are, in the field, who know what is required and how to ensure that the objectives are met. So that's why we focus on civil society organizations. We also focus on government because we recognize that many of the things that we want civil society organizations to do are really recommendations to government, are things that they on their own cannot achieve without a partnership with government. And so if government is running effectively and efficiently, to a large extent you actually may not even need a civil society. They're always necessary, but if you have a functioning government, then it makes the work of civil society a lot more easier. And so we also support civil society. And for these elections, we are really looking for organizations that can work with the electoral body at the federal level, because that's where all the policies and the laws come from, but also at the subnational level, because that's where some of the challenges are going to be faced. And so we are looking at people who can support, like Kole said, people who can support those who want to collect their PVCs, make sure that people know where to go, how to go there, understand how to vote on election day, because a lot of people, may not even know what to do. We had already supported with information on the voting, on how to vote and mobilizing people to get their, to participate in the process, to collect their PVCs and the rest of it. And we're also hoping that we will support organizations that will be able to work with the electoral body to develop technologies that will help people identify where to pick up their PVCs, for instance, because that's a major challenge now. A lot more people have registered than they had registered in the past, and being able to get their PVC is could create a challenge. So these organizations are hoping on apps to develop apps that will help people identify where to pick up their the PVCs and where to go to vote on election day, and also help the electoral body with communication, because there's a lot of misinformation, and we want the electoral body to be on top of the information so that they are not reactionary. They're providing real-time, on-time information so that it makes it a lot easier for people to know what's real, and then maybe even forestall the fake news altogether. So these are the areas, and there are organizations that have done this for a number of years that we will continue to support to do this.
Well, that's an extraordinarily broad church of things that you are doing, and commendable things, I have to say. Let me come to you, Hawa. Thank you very much indeed for your patience. You mentioned at the outset the considerable work that you and your organization are doing across Africa. How much do you believe that politicians on the continent have let down Africans with corruption and bad leadership? Because that must inform, at least partly, the story of what you're doing on the continent.
It's true. If you look at the African continent, citizens are ahead of their leaders in terms of demands for good governance, of integrity, of management of resources, equitable management of resources, and that's why actually our organization work both on the demand on the supply and the supply side. But we cannot just sit and and lament ourselves. That's why we are really working into bringing citizens' voices, amplifying citizens' voices, and working on the demand side to make sure that leaders are accountable, to make sure that also we have politicians that are that delivers on citizens' needs. So for instance, when we work on elections, we just don't work on the process. We also make sure that there are, for instance, issue-based campaigns to make sure that when politicians run for office, in their manifesto, there are issues that that are relevant for the citizens, that they factor in and they address issues that actually citizens want them to talk about. African problems are just failure of governance. we have the human capital, we have the resources, we have everything that we need to be, to be developed countries, to be equitable countries. We have the social capital, we have communities, we have local forces, we have our culture, our religions, give us all that we need, to be societies that are thriving. But unfortunately, our leaders, our politicians are failing us. And I work also how to make sure that, candidates, for instance, that even emerge from parties, from primaries, are the ones that reflect citizens' need. Today, what we see is that when you look at the age of politicians or candidates, there's a huge discrepancy between the population median on the African continent. It's a youthful population, but we have old candidates. We have candidates that that are not progressive enough, in terms of Pan-Africanism, in terms of gender inclusiveness, in terms of gender equality. How to make sure that we bring these young people and we make sure that we notice them, we make sure that they are interested in governance, that they run for positions, that young women run and are elected. These are issues that we are working on our organization to make sure that the failure of our politicians don't lead to discouragement with regard to political participation, with regard to running for office, but also with regard to just making sure there are checks and balances mechanisms.
Well, we've certainly seen some encouraging signs in Africa recently, haven't we? I mean, the Kenyan elections, they elected 7 female governors. We've also seen some considerable progress in places like Rwanda and, of course, Tanzania and so on. But let me come to you, Kole Shettima of the MacArthur Foundation. What are your concerns as the election season approaches in Nigeria?
Well, I'm very concerned about insecurity. I think this is a major issue across the country in different pockets of hotbeds that we have all across. And I think the ability of INEC to conduct an election in a situation where they don't really control the security agencies and other things is something that we're all concerned about. Secondly, I think I'm very concerned about the tone and of the conversations about our elections and our politics. I think that we have reduced our elections in terms of ethnic and religious identities. No one is talking about probably the real issue that confront us as people and as citizens in terms of Naira being 700 to the dollar, fertilizer being 22,000 Naira per bag, that the reality that you have a minimum wage of 30,000 Naira, that 30,000 Naira you can't even buy a ticket to any place to go. So those real issues, I think we have sidelined them, and we are focusing on issues that, from my view, are not the real issue that we as a people, as a country, whether you are from wherever country you are, or whatever religion you practice, or whatever you believe in, you go to the same market, you are going to suffer the same thing. So I think that what we should really be focusing upon, we are not really focusing on. So I think those are the two probably major things that I think for me. And if there's a third one that I think I would like to add is our attitude of our politicians and the behavior of the politicians, in my view. I think that our politicians are behaving in a zero-sum game whereby they believe that this is a do and die affair. It's not about service to the people, but about themselves and their families, and probably the next 10, 20, 30 generations of their families that they are always thinking about, but not thinking about the big picture about what the country needs, what the country should do, what are the ideas, what are the vision, what do they have for the people. I don't hear that one. And these are I think, more concerning issues for me at the moment.
Right. And let me come to you, Dr. Chichi Okoye of the Ford Foundation. I mean, you talked earlier about the fact that your organization has supported the Electoral Commission for many years in this country. Have you been happy with the way INEC has conducted past general elections, with all the allegations of manipulation or official interference and fraud, amid concerns that those ballots have not always been free and fair?
Well, I know we are a nascent democracy, and things get better every day. The electoral law that we have today is not the same as the one that we had in the past. And if you look at the electoral law today, it's a lot more people-oriented. It has addressed major issues of transparency and accountability. It is providing the use of, it's allowing the use of technology. It's going to make it a lot easier for transmissions to be done in a transparent manner. The participation of people, the people's votes are a lot more protected today than it was. So I think that there's a lot that has happened, and I think that this is accumulation of the support from development partners, and also from the electoral body itself. There has always been, the electoral body has always been willing to look at the challenges of each election and has tried to improve upon it, and I think has continued to do that. We recognize, of course, that there are many challenges. Some they can still work on, but some are beyond them. The issue of security, for instance, is not something that they can do alone. The issue of electricity, you know, if you're at the polling booth and the beavers don't work, it's not necessarily the electoral commission, but the fact that, you know, there's network failure, there's electricity failure. So many of the challenges that we face as a nation also affects the elections and the electoral body. But I think that there is a willingness to improve. I think there's a willingness, which is actually very important, that there is a willingness to get things better. Whether we're going to have perfect elections, I don't think so, but I think we're going to definitely see an improved election. The only challenge, like Kole said, is the security. Will people be able to vote everywhere in Nigeria? That's a question mark. And but again, we see INEC taking the front role, organizing meetings with security agencies, trying to address and understand what the implications will be from a legal perspective if they're not able to conduct elections in certain places. So I think that they're being quite proactive. Maybe the only from a gender perspective, which is something that is important to me, they may not be monitoring as much women's participation, which is something that they're supposed to be doing, and the participation of people with disabilities when it comes to political parties and primaries and the rest of it. But I will say that overall, it's a march in the right direction, and with the supports of everyone and less skepticism from Nigerians, that they will deliver a much better election than we have seen in the past.
Well, I think that's very diplomatically answered, but thank you very much indeed for giving us that broad sort of stroke of your assessment of how things have gone and how they're likely to go. And Hawa of Osiwa, you are of course Senegalese, you're based in Senegal, but Nigeria, a big country, the giant really of the region and of the continent, and so whatever happens here is watched very closely in other parts of the continent. And of course Osiwa, your organization, also operating in Nigeria. Are you more or less confident with the processes of election as 2023 approaches in this country from your observation perch in Senegal?
Yeah, actually, you know, we work on many elections in the region and on the continent. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Dr. Chichi said. Looking at INEC, there are really, you know, many positive things to learn from INEC. I come from Senegal. I know other electoral managed bodies on the continent. INEC seems to be far ahead. You know, the new electoral law with all the, you know, very progressive provisions as that are citizen voters centered are something to learn from. The effort in terms of transparency, the openness, the level of openness and access that civil society has with the INEC here in Nigeria. I haven't seen it in Senegal, and I haven't seen it in many countries. And I think there is an effort to really gather, to build trust, not in very you know, transparent manner. It's not up for me, from what I'm seeing. I'm not romanticizing, but from what I'm seeing, it's not about talk, it's not about promise, but it's about real things being done, addressing the issues as they are arising. It's true that there are things that are beyond their control. If you look at security, if you look at infrastructure, but in terms of managing, in terms of trying to modernize the process, the technology, of course, the technology has also its challenges, the implications. We have seen what happened in Kenya just recently in terms of electronic transmission of results and other issues. But there is an effort to go towards the voter to make progress and to be open to amelioration. So
Okay.
this is a good thing. And the other thing is that just I wanted to say
Very
is that
briefly, because we're almost out of time.
Yeah,
Very briefly.
Nigeria is very important for the region, especially at this time when we are seeing proliferation of coup, decrease trust towards democratic system itself. Nigeria can teach a lesson to the region, can restore confidence in democracy, in elections, but also for all the continent and even in the world, because the challenges are worldwide.
Well, that's a very important point you made, and that's a good note to end on. Obviously, clearly a lot of work to do with many issues facing Nigeria and Africa, and we're very grateful that we have development partners such as yours that are trying to help Nigeria and the rest of the continent deal with these challenges. Clearly, you all have a very large in tray. But I want to thank you very much indeed. Dr. Chichi Okoye of the Ford Foundation. She's the regional director. The director of the MacArthur Foundation in Nigeria, Kole Shettima. And of course, the division director of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, or Osiwa Hawa, who operates from Senegal. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. And you're watching Arise Prime Time. Plenty more still ahead. In a moment, I'll introduce our analyst who is with me for the rest of the program. Stay with us.